Hello, I'm Steve Littlewood and I'll be presenting this series of video tutorials on Pictures to Exe, how to create a Pictures to Exe show, an audio-visual show, and we'll be using Pictures to Exe version 9. So what is an audio-visual show? Well, we can describe it as a series of pictures normally presented to music or another type of audio accompaniment. And for this we need specialized software. And for this demonstration, of course, we're using Pictures to Exe, but an alternative popular one is ProShow Gold, and of course there's probably lots of others available. Now, audio-visual shows have been going on for many years, and in the days of slides, you'd have 2 or even banks of projectors coupled to synchronization units, amplifiers, and a whole host of other things that we'd try to produce an audio-visual show. And of course you can see the sort of expense that would have to be put into producing one of these shows. Now these days, just using Pictures to Exe, a laptop and a digital projector, we can produce shows of far more complexity, better quality than was possible with all this equipment in the olden days. So things have really moved on. Now Pictures to Exe, this is the screen grab from their web page. We can buy it in, well, you can trial it or you can buy it here. So that's the front page. Now Pictures to Exe is a Windows-based program, but I've done some research on the web, and apparently you can buy Windows emulation programs, Boot Camp, VMware, Fusion, which you can then run Pictures to Exe through if you're using a Mac computer. However you create these shows, you can then save the final shows to be presented either on a PC type of machine or a Mac machine, and you have options to save the final file, in either of the 2 types of final output machine that you'll be using. To buy the software, and you've got to download it from their website, you can buy the full version, the deluxe version, which I would kind of recommend because that incorporates some of the more advanced audio editing features which are missing from the Essentials one. But when you buy it, these dollars are converted to pound equivalents. You can also, if you're already got an older version, like to version 7, you can upgrade for a more modest cost. This is from, again, their website, showing you the differences between the deluxe version and the essentials version. And you can see down here some of the things that are missing here for videos and stuff. But down here for the audio, envelope tool, control of key points and things, these are really important, or they make the work, the job of creating an audiovisual a lot easier if you've got them. So this is one of the reasons why I'd tend to go for the deluxe version if you're making the choice. To make a Pictures to Exe show, you need camera equipment to take the pictures in the first place. You need a computer. You need the specialist software. So we've got PTE, Pictures to Exe. We need to be able to edit our photos, our still photographs, and even videos if you're going to incorporate video. So you might need some video editing software as well. And an audio editor. You can record voices and things within Pictures to Exe itself, but generally you may need an audio editing program to both capture audio and edit it before bringing it into Pictures to Exe. I currently use Sony's Soundforge Audio Studio, which is about £40 odd. You can download for free Audacity, and that's a pretty good program as well. You need a digital projector or a large TV, and the latest 4K TVs would be absolutely brilliant for this sort of presentation. And possibly a hi-fi system. If you're not using a large television, then with a digital projector it's best to use a decent hi-fi system so that your pictures are accompanied by some decent quality audio. So Pictures to Exe allows you to sequence your still pictures, your music and audio, video. Here you can put some spoken word into the shows as well. And we use a projector or a TV to display the show. So how does PTE work? It works like a database program initially. So here we have pictures to execute, and as you bring images and music and audio, commentary, whatever, into Pictures to Exe, it doesn't actually move any of the data. All it does is provide links across your computer to your different drives and different folders, produces these links, and when it's creating the show, it's constantly looking at these links to wherever the data is stored. Okay, so and this produces quite a modest file size when you're actually creating the Pictures to Exe show. If you move or Pictures to Exe cannot find, these links are broken, then you'll get a display like this: image not found or music not found, and Pictures to Exe will complain. So the idea is that when we create a show, we don't change any of the data, otherwise we're going to get one of these complaining signs. When you finally assembled your Pictures to Exe show, you then create the final executable file, and that brings together all of the data from all over your computer into one single file. It doesn't move any of this, it just assembles and duplicates everything into one big file. And you can see the difference between the working file here, the PTE file, which is 321 kilobytes in this case, up to 37 megabytes for the final executable file. So this is where it's actually brought all the information and produced a full-size file there. So you'll end up with a PTE file, which is how you assemble the show, and the final resulting executable file. Now the executable file, all it means is that when you've created this file, it is a self-running file. You don't need any other software on your computer. All you've got to do is double click the executable file and it will run the show itself. When you're creating a Pictures to Exe show, it's a really good idea to bring all of your data together into one structured folder and subfolder. So here you can see here we've got an example demo PTE show, and we've got different subfolders within there that will house all of the data needed to create this one particular show. Okay, so we can create typical folders for exact image sizes, full size images, where we're maybe going to be doing some animation, and I'll be running through all these in due course. Illustrations, music, the final Pictures to Exe files, for the PTE and the executable files, we can store in a separate folder here. If you're incorporating any videos, okay, so it's best to create a nice file structure and subfolders for your project before you start. And of course, what subfolders you have will depend on what you're going to incorporate in it. So instead of scattering all of your data across all the your hard drives and folders, everything is contained in a neat top level folder and subfolders. Okay, and then we produce our little PTE file, and of course we don't want to move any of the data that you contain in here, otherwise, as we've seen, PTE will complain. And from that we can then produce our final executable file. So the software I use to create a pictures to exit show is Windows Explorer, which I use to create all the folders and subfolders, basically file and folder management within the computer. I use Bridge to sort through the images and before sending them to Photoshop. Camera Raw to process, because I take all of my pictures in a raw file format, as I hope you do as well. Although everything we're going to end up with are JPEGs, it's always best to start off with a raw file. So use Camera Raw, so Bridge into Camera Raw to process your raw files, then from Camera Raw into Photoshop to convert them into the correct size, into JPEG images, the right color space, and we'll be covering all this. You may need a audio editing software package, in this case Sony SoundForge or Audacity, as I've mentioned. Windows Media Player, you can use that for ripping CD music. Ripping is a term used to describe how you will basically rip the music from the CD and save it as a file that the pictures to exit can understand. You can't import music directly from a CD for pictures to exit. You need to save it in a relevant file type like MP3 on your computer, which you can then import into pictures to exit. And of course you need pictures to exit to create the show in the first place. So there's quite a few stages, preparatory stages, we need to go through before we end up at pictures to exit to create the show itself. When you're going to create a pictures to exit show, you need to think ahead as to what the final output is going to be presented using. So it could be a full HD projector, which generally has a resolution of 1920 by 1080 pixels, and all your image sizes needs to be defined in pixels, so horizontal and vertical pixel dimensions. The aspect ratio, so pictures to exit generally runs on the principle of what is the aspect ratio. So 16:9 is actually the shape of a full HD projector. Okay, so if you create a 16:9, you can create a 4K, which is 4 times the resolution of a full HD TV or projector, in the 16:9 aspect ratio, and it will run perfectly well on a full HD projector as well as a 4K television. So here you can see the image resolution of your images. Full HD is 1920 by 1080 pixels. So that's 1920 pixels, little dots creating the image across by 1080 pixels high. Okay, so that's the format of a HD 1920 by 1080. Or if it was a 4K scale for 4K telly, which is the new standard that's coming in, it'd be 3840 pixels across by 2160 pixels vertical. If you wish to fill your screen with an image, and of course you don't need to fill your screen, you can have smaller images within the show if you wish. You also need to consider, will you be animating any of the images using zooms, pans, rotations? In which case you'll have to scale the images larger than the projected image or the displayed image, so that you don't lose image quality, and I'll be going through that as in due course. So sizing your images, you don't have to resize images. However, it's best practice to, because some of these new the latest cameras have got, like my camera, has got 50 megapixels, which is a huge image size to be presented as a full HD. You'll be wasting a lot of potential storage space, and the computer will be really struggling to present an image of that number of pixels. So you don't want an image that's too large, because it will slow the whole processing down. You'll consume a lot of space in creating the final size, file size. Or conversely, you don't want an image that's too small, so that you're basically stretching those pixels and giving you an inferior quality image. If you're producing an image that just fits the size of the screen, then ideally you want to create a file that is exactly those dimensions. If it's full HD, it's 1920 by 1080. Or for 4K, it's 3840 by 2160 pixels. Okay? To create an exact size. So the aspect ratio, I'll be using 16 by 9. So that gives you that shape of image. And of course, image animation. If you're going to produce the panning, rotation, zooming effects, you need to make sure that your image is actually larger than the pixel dimensions of the final output machine. So here's some examples of relative sizes of so this was the sort of standard size of projectors when we first got digital projectors, 1024 by 768 pixels. The PAGB and the WPF then went on to a standard size of 14 by 1050 pixels. We then got full HD, which is the standard size for a full HD telly or digital projector. Now, if you've been to the Currys recently, you'll probably see that all the tellies are virtually, well, they're virtually all now what's called 4K. And this represents the 3840 or virtually 4000 pixels, 4K, 4000 pixels across by 2160 pixels high. So this is the new standard, or the standard that's going to become most prevalent in the next few years. So that's what I'm looking to produce in these series of tutorials, something that will present a really high quality image on a 4K television. Okay. But this is a 16 by 9 aspect ratio, as is the full HD. It's also a 16 by 9. So if we produce a show for a 4K telly using pixel dimensions like this, it will present, well, it projects really nicely on a full HD projector, because that is the way Pictures to Exe works. It works on aspect ratio rather than pixel based data, but you do need the resolution, the pixel data, in order to provide the quality of image depending on what the final output is. So sizing your images. Say we're doing we're looking to produce a full HD 1920 by 1080 pixel size. Okay. When that is projected or using a full HD television, that image will fill the entire image area. Okay. 1920 by 1080, and you get the best quality because that's what the resolution of the output machine. Now, if you wanted to zoom into an area, you have that potential because the camera that I've used in this instance is actually 16 megapixels, and it has a sensor resolution of 4896 by 3264 pixels. And if you map them out across here, you can see that if you divide it up into 1920 and another 1920, we'll get a remainder of 1064 pixels. So we could crop in to areas like this and still maintain good image quality, because we're still we're not expanding any of these pixels more than they're supposed to be. So say we wanted to crop in there, we could crop in and we still get down to the pixel resolution of the original image, 1920 1080 there. Okay, so you could zoom in and you'd still get the best quality because we're only zooming into the final pixel resolution of your image. However, what you don't want to do is zoom in even further, because then you'll start to see all the texture and the pixels of the image. So that's zooming in too far. But that gives you an example of a zooming effect that you can create within Pictures to Exe. Okay. Now, in more recent versions of Pictures to Exe, we have a thing called styles, and this image here has been created using styles, border, zoom in. And I'll just do it again. So the image, this here, is represented in the background automatically, and when you select the slide, you can see it zoomed in, and it also has a border around it, and you can apply here, see, slide style, borders, border zoom in, and from each of these different types of slide style, and you've got basic, borders, captions, experimental image, wedding, or any that you've created yourself. When you select one of these, you then have a range of options to control the way that style behaves on that image. Okay, so they can be quite useful if you want to produce fairly sophisticated movement and animation with just a few clicks of the button. And there, see another dissolve. Now this one here, these are from the wedding slide styles. And initially you have to select 3 different images and then go to slide styles, go to the wedding, 3 portraits version, and it will automatically create that animation like that. Color spaces. This diagram represents, if we look at this oval area here, that represents all of the colors that the human eye is capable of capturing. Now when digital technology first became important in using computers, they developed a color space called sRGB, which basically encompassed those that range of colors that was possible to be reproduced using technology of the time. And you can see it's only a small area of the potential colors and shades in nature. As technology advanced, the technology could then encompass more colors and tones, and so a color space called Adobe 1998 RGB was created. And in more recent years, a ProPhoto RGB color space has been created that encompasses virtually all of the color space, all the colors and tones available in the natural world. Now, as well as incorporating these different, or this greater range of colors and tones, these different color spaces alter the way the red, green and blue color distribution is displayed. So the sRGB is trying to simulate the entire color gamut that you see here, and it does that by shifting colors and tones as it represents it. Adobe hasn't got to do quite so much shifting and manipulating of the colors to produce the same sort of effect, and ProPhoto has got to do even less. But the thing is, in order to represent all these red, green and blue shades and tones, the software you're using must be able to understand these color spaces, and until recently Pictures to Exe could only understand sRGB color space. Any other color space would be rendered incorrectly. Now, prior to version 9, if you had and of course these are all JPEG images saved as different color spaces. So that's the sRGB color space, and Pictures to Exe version 8 and backwards would correctly render the colors. If you'd saved your images as Adobe 1998, you can see that the colors are more muted. It hasn't correctly rendered the colors and tones. It's the same image, just saved as in different color spaces. And Pro Photo is even worse. It just can't render the colors correctly. Okay, so you always had to save your images in the sRGB color space, otherwise Pictures to Exe would incorrectly render them. Pictures to Exe 9, and this is an example of, well, it's the same slide. Okay, using Pictures to Exe 9, and now it does correctly interpret all the color spaces here. However, because you're using JPEG images, which are 8 bits per channel, I'd always recommend you only save them as sRGB color space, because it introduces additional tonal issues if you use a larger color space, but you're still only saving it as a JPEG image. So save all my advice is to save your images as JPEG image finally in the sRGB color space to get the best out of a JPEG image. You can also incorporate, of course, videos into your Pictures to Exe show, and this just gives you an idea of, you can have windows within a window also as a video. You can have several of these, or you can have as many as you like, really. So Pictures to Exe can handle videos, and of course you heard the sound as well. This is just demonstrating that this is an MP3 audio file. This is one saved in WAV. It's a WAV file. And this is a WMA file. So I'm just confirming that it will actually play all of those audio type files. Now, when you're producing an AV show, there's lots and lots of potentially repetitive work. So you need to really get organized, need to plan, create those folders, find and bring together all your images, music and other data. The music usually defines the length of the show, because some music's got a finite length, unless you want to stitch together a sequence of music tracks. So the music will define how long the show is going to be, usually, and that will tend to dictate the number of pictures you can put in there, to be presented over a certain length, especially if you're going to do it to the beat of the music. So the slides will change to the beat of the music. You can use Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom, to gather together all your images into things called collections. So Lightroom uses a thing called collections, or you can use collections within Lightroom to bring together all your images that you're going to use for your show. If you're using Adobe Bridge, again, there is a collections facility, but I prefer to use star ratings and color labels to bring the images together, or to sort your images out and gather them together. Adobe Camera Raw, when you're processing your images, you can maybe process one of them, which is typical of maybe a series of images, and then save that processing selection as a preset. And then you can apply a preset to a whole load of other images and save time. So you're not having to process every single image, which could be 100 or 200 images. So you can use presets to really speed up the processing of your images. In Photoshop, you can use actions to carry out repetitive work, such as maybe creating a keyline around your image, applying a specific amount of sharpening, saving the image to a certain size, to the correct color space, into a specific folder. And you may even want to create a batch processing system for that. But actions are really good for really speeding up the repetitive types of work that you might have to do. We need to set up pictures to XE, the aspect ratio, whether it's going to be auto advance for an automatic show, the type of dissolves, and of course you can change these, the use of slide styles, you can change these during the production of the show, but these things like aspect ratio and the auto advance and one or two other things you need to set before you start populating the show. And all of this needs to be planned. You need to think about the final output before you start doing any of the rest of it, you know, like the aspect ratio of the output device, whether it's going to be a full HD projector. The aspect ratio is 16:9. There you go, and there's the pixel dimensions, which are important for sizing your images. If it's going to be a 4:3 aspect ratio, which is common within the PAGB or the Welsh Photographic Federation, the latest size is specified as 1600 by 1200 pixels. They've got a new projector, and that's the native resolution of that projector. The upcoming standard, the world standard, I suppose, is 4K, and that has a native resolution of 3840 by 2160 pixels, and I'll be using that standard for the creation of the shows during these demonstrations. 4K TV. Okay, so again we've got those pixel dimensions and an aspect ratio of 16:9. So I'll be running through the sequence of how to create a non-animated sequence, a 4K non-animated sequence, 16:9 aspect ratio, and these are the pixel dimensions of the images that we'll need to populate the show, and the images will fill the entire screen. Okay, I'll show you how to create slide styles, which puts the images in a more central, or doesn't use the full extent of the screen, but can present them in a more pleasing way, I suppose. And I'll show you how to create an animated show as well. So this is where we've got images that are larger than the output size, but we can zoom them, rotate them, and produce really animated shows, interesting shows. Okay, so now we'll go on to practical demonstration.